With her case against former FBI Director Jim Comey faltering in a court of law, Team Trump appears to be taking their case to the tabloids. Speaking out in the pages of the New York Post today, Trump-appointed prosecutor Lindsay Halligan, she has brought the cases against two people high on Donald Trump's enemies list, Jim Comey and New York Attorney General Tish James. After what could only be described as a very bad day in court, where Halligan had to admit that she did not present the two-count indictment against Jim Comey to the full grand jury, Halligan lashed out at the judge overseeing the case, Michael Nachmanoff. Quote, "Personal attacks like Judge Nachmanoff referring to me as a puppet don't change the facts or the law." Perhaps she should get acquainted with both. Even the New York Post points out the judge never actually called her a puppet. He asked Comey's defense attorney, Michael Dreeben, quote, "So your view is that Ms. Halligan is a stalking horse or a puppet, for want of a better word, doing the president's bidding." And ABC News points out that the judge, quote, "didn't dispute in court when DOJ attorney Tyler Lemons flatly rejected that characterization." The Justice Department backed Halligan, saying this in a statement, quote, "A federal judge should be neutral and impartial. Instead, this judge launched an outrageous and unprofessional personal attack yesterday in open court against U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan. DOJ will continue to follow the facts and the law." Now, again, the judge never called Halligan a puppet. He was asking a question. So much for following the facts. Putting that aside, the timing of these attacks on the judge, they cannot be ignored. These claims of bias come after a week in which practically every aspect of the DOJ's handling of this case has come under such intense scrutiny, to the point where the way Halligan handled the case could be her undoing. Not only did Judge Nachmanoff question prosecutors over how the indictment was handled yesterday, earlier this week, another judge found a, quote, "disturbing pattern of profound investigative missteps," along with, quote, "fundamental misstatements of the law before the grand jury." The Trump Justice Department resorting to attacks on the judge as a case against one of Donald Trump's top targets threatens to fall apart is where we start today. Here with me at the table, senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, plus former top official at the DOJ and legal analyst Andrew Weissman, and voting rights attorney and founder of Democracy Docket, Mark Elias, is here as well. It is good to see you all. Mark, let's start with you. The level of incompetence here, pretty staggering. So when all else fails, attack the judge. Is that their plan?
It's definitely their plan. One thing that has been a constant through line of Donald Trump's political career is having really incompetent lawyers. I mean, if you remember, this is a guy who lost more than 60 cases along with his allies after the 2020 election. He didn't actually have much luck in any of the defamation or other lawsuits he filed, except where folks capitulated and decided that they were going to settle bogus claims. And his Department of Justice is the gang that can't shoot straight. I mean, it is not just in this criminal case where they are definitely unable to shoot straight. It is also in all of these court cases around the country where you see them losing. So what they do is they make outrageous legal claims that don't have merit. They find lawyers who are willing to sacrifice their own integrity to make those claims. And then when they fail, as they will in the Comey case and the Tish James case and others, they then lash out and tell lies. And so whether it was a big lie about the 2020 election, or it's lies now about the judge in Virginia, or it's lies that they are telling about judges or cases out in the country involving ICE detentions. This is just what this administration does. It is what Donald Trump demands in terms of loyalty from people who work for him. And it's a really sad day or a sad time in America, but it's good for the rule of law that at least the judges are standing up.
Well, Lisa, can you think of another example where you have seen an attorney complain about a judge in the press?
Yes, I have, but it's been in this administration. So recently, the Federalist Society had its annual convention, and at that convention, Todd Blanche sat for a fireside chat, Todd Blanche being the Deputy Attorney General, and he made some comments about the judges that have ruled against President Trump, calling them radical and rogue, and he characterized the administration's sort of policy fights right now as a war against the federal judiciary, a war in which they were recruiting active soldiers to come and join the Justice Department in standing up for what they consider to be justice. But putting aside this administration, have I seen that before? It's not common to see U.S. attorneys go out and attack judges. I don't think I've ever seen that particular circumstance happen before, Alicia.
Well, I mean, Andrew, the stakes are high here. It's happening at a time when threats against judges are soaring. You had the New York Times reporting on data from U.S. Marshals back in the end of May of this year that showed, quote, in the 5-month period leading to March 1st of this year, 80 individual judges had received received threats, the data shows. Then over the next 6 weeks, an additional 162 judges received threats, a dramatic increase. That rise coincides with Trump's attacks on judges who ruled against the administration. So the point here is they know what they are doing, Andrew. They know what the stakes are, and yet they continue undeterred.
Well, look, one of the last checks that we have in the system is the federal judiciary, and that is why, as Lisa noted, you have Todd Blanche saying we have a war. That's the Deputy Attorney General's words, a war on the judiciary. He described them as all sort of radicals, but that would include judges that Donald Trump himself appointed. It would include Judge Wilkinson in the Fourth Circuit, a leading light of the conservative judiciary. And it comes with poor grace when we're talking about Lindsay Halligan, where the courts are looking into whether she had violated the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the attorney-client privilege, and was sort of grossly incompetent in the way that she presented the case. Those are serious charges. Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, attorney-client privilege violations are all being investigated. And her response as a member of the Department of Justice is to go to a tabloid and say, I don't like the judge, he called me a puppet when he didn't. I mean, that is the level that we are dealing with at this point on the war on the judiciary, the last check that we have in a system that's supposed to have checks and balances.
Well, Lisa, you and I both have 2 daughters, so we're accustomed to litigating fights like this. She called me this name. Yes, she did. No, she didn't. But let's just, I want to read you Comey attorney Michael Dreeben's response to this judge's question. I don't want to use language about Ms. Halligan that suggests anything other than she did what she was told to do. The President of the United States has the authority to direct prosecutions. She worked in the White House. She was surely aware of the President's directive. She didn't have prosecutorial experience, but she took on the job to come to the U.S. Attorney's Office and carry out the President's directive. And this was a directive to the Attorney General. I think we know that the Attorney General is highly responsive to the President's directives. She doesn't say, excuse me, Mr. President, this is my job. And we're talking here fundamentally about the lack of DOJ independence.
We are. And I think one of the things that's most stunning about the quote that you just read is that Dreeben himself, a former Deputy Solicitor General, is acknowledging in his presentation to the judge that the President of the United States has the authority to direct prosecutions. Because no one has ever said before that the President doesn't have that authority. It's sort of in the post-Watergate era that the norms were that it was improper and inappropriate for the President to direct those prosecutions, not that he doesn't have the authority itself. But what Mr. Dreeben is also referring to here is when he's talking about the directive, he's talking about the tweet to Pam Bondi in which he says that they need to move fast in going after Tish James, Adam Schiff, Jim Comey, and then follows up by saying that Lindsay is ready and that she likes you. It's within a matter of days that Lindsay Halligan brings this case. And that's one of the things that the judge here was looking into. How do you explain this as anything other than following the directions of the President of the United States when someone with no prosecutorial experience comes into this office, sees that directive, knows that there's a declination memo on the table, and yet makes a decision 4 days later to charge Jim Comey? How is that anything but the retribution that the president has promised?